There's a moment in most lateral partner interviews where you're asked a version of this question. Tell us about your practice. It sounds simple. It's not. Because what the firm is really asking isn't just a factual question about what you do. They're asking you to tell them a story, a narrative about your practice that explains where you've been, what you've built, why it matters, and where you're going. And most attorneys, in my experience, don't answer that question well. They give a chronology. They list clients. They talk about deal sizes or case results, and all of that is fine, but none of it is compelling. The attorneys who land the best opportunities are the ones who could tell a coherent, persuasive story about their practice that makes the listener understand not just what they do, but why they're someone the firm would be lucky to have. I'm Andrew Wilcox, legal recruiter since 2003. Today, I want to help you construct the narrative, the practice story the firms actually want to hear. So what does a strong practice narrative include? Well, it has 4 components. There's the foundation, the evolution, current state, and then where you're going, the future trajectory. Let me walk you through each one of them. So the foundation, how did you get into this practice area? What attracted you to it? Who are the early mentors or experiences that shaped how you approach the work? This doesn't need to be long, but it needs to be genuine. Firms want to know that you're in this practice area because you care about it, not because you fell into it by accident. So, as an example, I started in securities litigation as a junior associate because I was interested in financial markets. What kept me in the practice was the intellectual challenge. These are complex cases with high stakes and sophisticated opposing counsel. I also realized early that I was good at working with clients under pressure, which is what most securities litigation is. So let's get into the evolution. How has your practice developed over time? What transitions have you made? What clients or matters were inflection points? Maybe a bill rate that went higher, or you wanted to get out of a certain type of liability work in construction defects, as an example, and you wanted to do higher end construction litigation work. How did you bridge that gap? How did you start taking that next step with doing something like that? So we want to show that trajectory, that you're not static, that you've grown and adapted. If you've gone back and gotten advanced degrees or LLMs, or you've gone to do additional learning on specific things like FINRA or cybersecurity or whatever, those are all great things and things to be passionate about. So over time, my practice evolved from pure defense work to include a significant advisory component. Clients who I defended in enforcement actions would come back to me before problems arose, asking for guidance on disclosure issues, on compliance structures. That advisory work became a major part of what I do. And it's where some of my best client relationships have developed. Now let's get into the current state. Where is your practice right now? What does your client base look like? What types of matters are you handling? What's the revenue picture? This is the substance, but it's delivered in the context of the story, not as a standalone recitation. So again, as an example, today my practice is about 60% government enforcement defense, 30% internal investigations, and about 10% advisory. I represent a mix of financial institutions, public companies, and senior executives. My book runs in the $4 million range annually, with about 70% of that work being work that I originated. So again, you have a good idea on your practice. You know your metrics. You know where the work is coming from. You're able to tell them a story that's going to start reducing risk because you know that you have a certain percentage that comes in this way. This is how much work you're doing. This is how much your annual book of business is. It's not just being unconsciously competent. You have a good idea of your metrics. So then where are you going in the future? Where is your practice going? What are the growth areas? What would the next 5 years look like if you had the right platform? This is where you connect your story to the opportunity at the firm you're interviewing with. So, as an example, looking forward, I see significant opportunity in crypto, in digital assets enforcement. The regulatory landscape is developing rapidly. The stakes are really high, And there are many attorneys who have deep experience in both securities enforcement and the technology side. That's where I want to build. And it's why this conversation with your firm is particularly interesting to me. Let's talk about how to avoid some of the common mistakes. The first one, the chronological recitation. Don't just walk through your resume. Chances are they've already read it. They may want you to touch on it, but unless you have several moves or anything that you need to call out, just touch on it and move on. I started at firm X as an associate, then I moved to firm Y, then I made partner, now I'm here. That's a timeline, not a narrative. Narratives have arcs. They have tension and resolution. They explain why things happened, not just what happened. The second mistake, the client name drop. Listing impressive clients without context doesn't tell the firm anything useful. You know how many people I work with who represent Amazon and Walmart and Coca-Cola, but I don't know how much they represent of them, but they do represent them, and everybody loves to say they represent them and Boeing and Home Depot and everything else. So listing your impressive clients is great, but what they want to know is not just who you represent, but how you built those relationships, what makes them sticky, and what value you provide that keeps them coming back. The third mistake, the false modesty or the false bravado. Don't undersell yourself, but also don't oversell. Both are transparent and both hurt you. Be honest about what you've built, what's working, and where you want to grow. The fourth mistake, the generic growth story. Every attorney says they want to grow their practice area. What firms want to hear is specificity. Where exactly do you want to grow? If you don't know, how are they supposed to know? What markets? What client types? What capabilities do you need to get there? Vague ambition is just not compelling. So, all of that, tailoring the narrative to the firm you're talking to. Your practice narrative should be fundamentally the same across conversations. It's your story, and it doesn't change based on who's listening. But the emphasis and the connection points should be calibrated to the specific firm. It's also your success story. It's your elevator pitch. You should be able to know these things in 30 seconds and be able to tell a story about it that's compelling. And if you don't, practice it. Nobody will see you in front of a mirror. You could look foolish for a few minutes if you get the story right. If you're interviewing with a firm that has a major West Coast office and you're trying to build West Coast business, that is part of your trajectory narrative. If you're talking to a firm with a particular strength in a sector you want to expand into, connect your future story to that strength. Don't fabricate connections that aren't there, but do make the connection explicit when it is there. The meta message your narrative sends is just as important. The content of what you say matters, but the way you deliver it matters as much. An attorney who tells their practice story with clarity, with structure, with a sense of purpose and direction, that attorney is signaling something important about how they think. They're showing that they can synthesize complex information into a coherent narrative. They're demonstrating self-awareness. They're showing that they've thought strategically about their career. Firms want partners who can do those things because those are the same skills that make someone good at business development, good at client counseling, good at building a practice. Your practice narrative is not just information. It's a demonstration of your professional maturity. And the last thing I'll say on authenticity, the best practice narratives are the ones that feel real, not scripted, not polished to the point of artificiality, just real. And sometimes that takes practice. If you have a non-traditional path, own it. If you made a career change, explain why. If you had setbacks, talk about what you learned. Firms don't expect perfection. They do expect honesty and self-awareness. The attorneys I've seen succeed most consistently in these conversations are the ones who tell their story truthfully and persuasively, who make the listener care about where they've been and excited about where they're going. That's the story worth telling. I'm Andrew Wilcox. This is the Lateral Brief. If you'd like to have a conversation about your career goals and practice, my number is 850-274-7849, or you can email me at andrew@wilcox-legal.com. As always, grateful, Andrew Wilcox.